There are some stories the world never forgets. Stories that survive generations. Stories that continue touching hearts long after the final chapter has been written. And then there are stories that do something even more powerful. They make people feel. Years pass. Decades pass. The world changes. New artists emerge. New trends arrive. New headlines replace old ones. Yet somehow, certain names continue living inside people's hearts. One of those names is Michael Jackson. What makes this remarkable is not simply the music. It is not only the records. It is not only the performances. It is not even the fame. The reason his story continues to affect people is something much deeper. His story reminds us of the fragile human being hidden behind extraordinary success. Because when most people hear the name Michael Jackson, they think of greatness. They think of sold-out stadiums. They think of iconic songs. They think of unforgettable dance moves. They think of a performer capable of captivating entire nations. But behind every legend is a person. And sometimes the person is far more complicated than the legend. Perhaps that is where the emotion begins. The realization that extraordinary success does not create an extraordinary shield against pain. Fame cannot stop loneliness. Money cannot guarantee peace. Recognition cannot erase insecurity. Success cannot eliminate the struggles that come with being human. And that truth appears again and again throughout Michael Jackson's story. Imagine being recognized almost everywhere you go. Imagine millions of people knowing your face. Imagine your every movement becoming public conversation. To many people, that sounds like a dream. But dreams often look different from the inside. Because while fame gives visibility, it can also take privacy. While fame creates admiration, it can also create distance. While fame brings attention, it can sometimes make genuine connection more difficult. That contradiction sits at the center of many people's fascination with Michael Jackson. He was one of the most recognized individuals on earth. Yet many people wonder whether he ever truly experienced the ordinary life that so many others take for granted. A quiet walk, a spontaneous conversation, an afternoon without cameras. Simple moments. Moments that most people barely notice. Yet moments that can become incredibly valuable when they disappear. Perhaps one reason people continue feeling emotional about his story is because it reflects something universal. Not celebrity, not stardom, not wealth, but the search for belonging, the search for understanding, the search for acceptance. Every person understands those feelings. Every person has experienced moments of wanting to be seen, moments of wanting to be understood, moments of wanting to know that they matter. That desire does not disappear simply because someone becomes famous. If anything, fame can sometimes make those questions even more complicated. The world often sees public figures as symbols, as icons, as larger-than-life personalities. But symbols do not have emotions. Icons do not have fears. Legends do not have doubts. At least that is what many people unconsciously assume. Reality is different. Reality is human, and human stories are never simple. That is why Michael Jackson's story continues generating emotion. Not because it is perfect, but because it is imperfect. Because people can see pieces of themselves within it. The pressure to succeed, the desire to be loved, the fear of misunderstanding, the hope of leaving something meaningful behind. These experiences belong to all of us. Different circumstances, different lives, different journeys, yet the emotions remain familiar. And emotions are what make stories endure. Facts can be forgotten, statistics can fade, records can eventually be broken. But emotions stay alive. When people listen to a song that reminds them of a particular moment in life, they remember the feeling. When they watch a performance that inspired them years ago, they remember the feeling. When they hear a story that touched their heart, they remember the feeling. And perhaps that is why Michael Jackson's legacy remains so powerful. Because it is connected to emotions, not just achievements. Millions of people associate his music with childhood memories, family gatherings, friendships, moments of joy, moments of hope, moments they never want to lose. In many ways, the music became part of their personal stories. And when something becomes part of your story, it becomes difficult to separate it from your emotions. That emotional connection survives time. It survives trends. It survives generations. And that is rare, very rare. Most cultural moments fade. Most public figures eventually become historical references. Yet some continue feeling present. Not because they are physically here, but because their work remains alive inside people's memories. Perhaps that is one reason why discussions about Michael Jackson often feel different. People are not simply discussing a celebrity. They are discussing experiences, memories, emotions, pieces of their own lives. And whenever people revisit those emotions, tears sometimes follow. Not always because of sadness. Sometimes because of gratitude. Sometimes because of nostalgia. Sometimes because they are remembering a version of themselves that no longer exists. The child who danced in the living room. The teenager who listened to certain songs during difficult times. The dreamer who found inspiration in creativity. Music has the power to preserve moments. And preserved moments often carry emotion. That emotion becomes stronger when combined with a story. A human story. A story about ambition, creativity, success, pressure, triumph, struggle, hope, legacy. All of those themes exist within Michael Jackson's life story. And all of those themes are deeply human. That is why the story continues to resonate. Not because people are only interested in fame, but because they recognize the humanity beneath it. They recognize the challenges, the contradictions, the complexity, and perhaps most importantly, they recognize the universal truth hidden within it. The truth that every person, no matter how successful, is searching for meaning. Searching for connection, searching for understanding, searching for a way to leave something valuable behind. That search is timeless. And as long as people continue searching for those things, stories like Michael Jackson's will continue moving hearts. Because beneath the fame, beneath the headlines, beneath the legend, there remains a simple reminder. Every extraordinary life is still a human life. And human stories are the ones we never truly forget. There is another reason Michael Jackson's story continues to move people long after his passing. It is because his story feels unfinished. Not unfinished in the sense of success. His achievements are part of history. His influence is undeniable. His music changed culture forever. Yet when many people look back at his life, they do not only see accomplishments. They see questions. Questions that never seem to disappear. Questions about happiness. Questions about identity. Questions about what it truly means to live under the weight of extraordinary expectations. Perhaps that is why so many people continue returning to his story. Not because they are searching for answers, but because they recognize something deeply human within the mystery. Throughout life, most people wear masks. Different versions of themselves for different situations. A professional version, a social version, a private version. The difference is that most people can remove those masks when they return home. Public figures often cannot. Their image becomes permanent. Their reputation becomes a responsibility. Their identity becomes something discussed by strangers. Imagine living in a world where millions of people have opinions about who you are. Imagine opening a newspaper and reading stories about yourself written by people you have never met. Imagine constantly hearing different versions of your own life. Over time, that experience can become exhausting. Not because criticism hurts, but because it becomes difficult to hear your own voice beneath the noise. And perhaps that is one of the saddest aspects of extraordinary fame. The louder the world becomes, the harder it can be to hear yourself think. Michael Jackson lived much of his life inside that noise. A world of cameras, headlines, speculation, attention, a world where privacy often seemed impossible. Yet despite all of it, he continued creating, continued performing, continued imagining, continued dreaming, and there is something powerful about that. Because creativity requires vulnerability. Every song is a piece of a person. Every performance reveals something. Every artistic creation carries emotion. The audience may not always recognize it, but it is there, hidden beneath the melodies, hidden beneath the choreography, hidden beneath the spectacle. Artists often communicate through their work in ways they cannot communicate through ordinary conversation. Their music becomes their language. Their art becomes their voice. And perhaps that is why Michael's music continues connecting with people across generations. Because emotions do not age. Technology changes, fashion changes, culture changes, but emotions remain remarkably similar. A person listening to a song today can feel the same hope, sadness, excitement, or longing that someone felt decades ago. That emotional connection creates something rare. It creates timelessness. And timelessness is not something that can be manufactured. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be forced. It emerges when art touches something universal, something deeply human. That is exactly what many people find when they revisit Michael Jackson's story. They find pieces of themselves. The dreamer who wanted to accomplish something meaningful. The child who wanted to be accepted. The individual who hoped to leave a positive mark on the world. The person who feared being misunderstood. These are not celebrity experiences. These are human experiences. That is why the story continues to resonate. Because beneath the fame exists a reflection of emotions that everyone understands. The desire to belong, the desire to be appreciated, the desire to know that your life mattered. Every human being shares these desires. Some pursue them through careers, some through relationships, some through creativity, some through service to others. Yet the search remains the same. A search for meaning, a search for purpose, a search for connection. And perhaps what makes Michael Jackson's story particularly emotional is the scale on which it unfolded. The successes were enormous. The attention was global. The expectations were relentless. Everything happened under a spotlight brighter than most people can imagine. Every triumph became international news. Every setback became international news. Every chapter unfolded before the eyes of the world. Very few people in history have experienced that level of visibility. Yet despite the extraordinary circumstances, the emotional core of the story remains surprisingly familiar. A person trying to navigate life. A person trying to understand themselves. A person trying to leave behind something meaningful. When viewed through that lens, the story becomes less about celebrity and more about humanity. And humanity is what makes people cry. Not perfection, not success, not records. Humanity, the moments of vulnerability, the moments of uncertainty, the moments of hope despite difficulty, the moments when someone continues moving forward even when the road becomes complicated. Those moments create emotional connection. Those moments create empathy. Those moments remind us of our own lives. Perhaps that is why certain images remain unforgettable. A performer standing alone on a stage. A song that reaches millions. A dream pursued against impossible odds. These images represent more than entertainment. They represent the human desire to create something lasting. To be remembered. To make a difference. To leave the world slightly better than we found it. And maybe that is the deepest reason why Michael Jackson's story continues touching hearts. Because it reminds people that every life, no matter how extraordinary, is still a human journey. A journey filled with dreams. A journey filled with challenges. A journey filled with moments of joy and moments of struggle. A journey that eventually becomes a legacy. And legacies are not built from perfection. They are built from impact. From inspiration. From the ability to make people feel something meaningful. Years pass. Generations change. The world moves forward. Yet some stories continue speaking to us. Not because they belong to the past, but because they continue teaching us something about ourselves. Perhaps that is the true power of Michael Jackson's story. Not the fame, not the success, not even the music, but the reminder that behind every legend is a human being. And behind every human being is a story worth understanding. A story filled with hope. A story filled with dreams. A story that continues touching hearts long after the final curtain falls.